Thanks very much for rejoining us. Up next, we have Shahrukh, who's going to give us a talk on Kerber roasting. I think you were the only CFP applicant to submit two different talks and said pick one, and we genuinely couldn't pick between the two. It was a really, really tough call. So I'm going to pass it over to you, man. You do your stuff. You're going to be awesome. Best of luck.
Thanks, man. Hello, everyone. Very good evening to all, and a very warm welcome to my presentation. To start off, first of all, I'd like to thank the amazing beer farmers for putting together this conference and giving us a platform and a chance to speak. A massive thank you to all the amazing mentors who helped us throughout with the preparations, motivations, calming down nerves. And finally, all my awesome fellow speakers who, in spite of having to prepare for their own talks, helped me with the presentation write-ins and provided me with the valuable feedback and criticisms regarding my talk. A huge shout out to all you guys. So I'm going to be presenting on an Active Directory attack, Kerber roasting. Firstly, let me tell you why I chose this topic, and then we'll move forward with the presentation itself. Well, recently I've been interested in enterprise security and especially Active Directory pen testing, as it has been quite a hot topic in the recent times. And secondly, because Active Directory is mostly used in many organizations, and knowing AD pen testing, misconfigurations, security flaws, weaknesses is important for both red and blue teams. So I thought, why not start with Kerberos, as it is the default authentication protocol used by Microsoft Active Directory. Anyway, let's move forward. So a little bit of who I am and what I do. I'm basically a petroleum engineering graduate who's turned into an InfoSec enthusiast. I'm pursuing my MS in information security. I try to be a pen tester and an ethical hacker, also a seasonal bug bounty hunter. And when I'm not hacking or studying for my MS, I usually play FIFA, and I'm a huge football fan and especially support Manchester United. So GGMU for the victory last night. Well, that's enough of me. So here's the agenda for today. Firstly, we'll take a trip down memory lane, and and we'll have a brief intro. Then we'll have a brief intro about the attack itself. Then we'll dive a little deeper into what Kerberos basically is and how the authentication protocol works. And then we'll move towards explaining where the vulnerability lies and what makes it possible to Kerberos. And afterwards, we'll have a practical demonstration of the attack. And I've skipped one point. I've included the defense and mitigation techniques and detection techniques for the blue team as well. So how it all began? It began back in 2014 during the days of Beercon 4.0. Tim Medine discovered this attack, and which basically is an attack against Kerberos in an Active Directory environment, targeting service accounts or user accounts that have service principal names set. A little overview about the attack itself. So basically, this is a credential dumping plus privilege escalation technique, which has been listed in the MITRE ATT&CK framework as an enterprise attack vector bearing the technique ID 1558.003. So how this attack basically works is the attacker first identifies existing SPNs in the domain. He then requests service tickets for those SPNs from the domain controller, and then uses a credential dumping technique to get the service tickets out from the memory, and then takes those service tickets off the domain to crack offline for clear text credentials, for plain text credentials. So if you're confused about all of this, well, I've got you covered. And the next couple of slides, we'll look at Kerberos authentication, and you'll start to see the pieces fall into place. All right. So Kerberos, to put it simply, whenever user requires the use of any service in the domain joined network, they first must authenticate themselves, and who is in charge of the authentication is the freaking three-headed guard dog of the underworld, Kerberos. So how Kerberos authentication works is the user first logs on to their workstation and enters their user ID and password into the client application for the service they desire to access. The client application then encrypts a timestamp with the password and sends it to the authentication server. The authentication server looks into its principal database for the password that matches the user ID, and then decrypts the encrypted timestamp and then issues a ticket granting ticket encrypted with the user's password and sends it back to the client application. Then this TGT, all right, so then this TGT is sent to the to a ticket granting server along with the SPN of the desired service, which verifies the received TGT with the authentication server, and then it sends a service ticket back to the client application. The client application finally sends the service ticket to the AD network services provider, which is basically a domain controller. And after verification of this service ticket, the user gets authorized access to their desired service. All right, so this is how Kerberos authentication works. So now what makes it possible to abuse Kerberos? Well, firstly, Kerberos uses shared secrets for authentication. As you may see during the first phase, the user's password is shared between the authentication server and the client application. Then in the next phase, the ticket granting ticket is shared between the ticket granting server and the client workstation. And then finally, the service ticket is shared between the ticket granting server and the AD network services provider. So, and the user's passwords are used to encrypt everything. So basically, if an attacker gets hold of these service tickets, he can then crack them offline for the service accounts passwords. So this is not a vulnerability. This is basically all right. Third, secondly, the Kerberos does not verify whether the user requesting the service tickets has permission to use the service or not, meaning that any user can request service tickets for any service. So this is not a vulnerability in Kerberos. This is basically a design feature of how Kerberos works. So until now, we've seen the theoretical aspects of these attacks. Now, if you'll allow me to make a quick prayer to the demo gods, and let's start with the demo. So I'm going to be using the assume breach approach. All right, so I'm going to show you guys two approaches to this attack. The first approach is that, for example, we have a compromised domain user in a domain environment. If I check my privileges, I am just a regular domain user. All right. Now what I'll do is I'll check the domain for existing SPNs. And you see we have an existing SPN found for SQL service. Now what I'll do is I'll quickly fire a PowerShell, and now I'll request these service tickets from Kerberos and store them in the memory. Let me get my notes for the commands. I'm gonna copy this SPN right here, paste it here. And now if I check, as you see, this ticket for service ticket for SQL service has been stored inside the memory. All right, so now let's get Mimikatz to extract out the service tickets from the memory. We have our service tickets. Now what I'll do is I'll quickly transfer these service tickets onto my Kali box right here, and then we can crack them for clear text credentials of the domain. Let me just zip these files so that it makes it easier for me to transfer. Right. Now we have our service tickets. So I'll be using John the Ripper to crack these service tickets, but the thing is that John doesn't understand these service tickets in .kirby form. So what I'll do is I'll first convert them into a form that John can understand. So for that I'll use this script, Kirby to John. And the ticket we're interested in is this SQL service. Give it a word list. Let's wait for John to crack this ticket. There we go. We have a clear text password for the SQL Service account. Now, the second approach that I was talking about earlier is, for example, we did not compromise a Windows box in a domain environment. Instead, we find a user's password. So what we can do is we can plug our attacking machine into the domain environment, into the domain network, And then we can use a script from Impacket Toolkit, the get user SPNs. And what it will do is it will basically automate the entire process and give us the service ticket. So let's just do that. Impacket Toolkit scripts have really weird syntaxes. So let me check my notes for the correct syntax. Now we put in the user's password, IP of the domain controller. Let's see what the IP basically is. And you see, in really no time at all, we have the service ticket for SQL service. Same thing, I'll copy this. Paste it right here and give this file to John. And once again, John has revealed the plain text credentials for SQL Service account. So that's how you go on performing curve roasting. Now for the detection and mitigation part, detection is fairly simple. You just have to enable the audit curve roast service ticket operations in the domain controller and look specifically for the event ID 4769. Now, you'll get to see this a lot of times. So good practice is to establish a threshold. For example, if this ID appears more than like 20 times or 25 times, then there's something fishy going on. Another thing that you can do is you can use honey SPNs. They basically work on the same principle as honeypots. You create a fake service, you assign a fake SPN to it, and make sure that your domain users never use or interact with this fake service. So when an attacker gets into your network, he doesn't know that this is a honey SPN, right? So he'll request the service ticket for the fake service as well, and that's how you can identify that curve roasting is being performed. Well, for the mitigation part, since I said that this is not a vulnerability, rather a design feature of Kerberos, so it cannot be mitigated by applying patches or applying some fixes. Rather, you can use strong and complex password policies to make the cracking of service tickets a bit difficult. And secondly, you can limit service accounts from administrative privileges. And yeah, credits and references for For further reading, you may go to Active Directory Security. You can read it about MITRE ATT&CK and Red Team experiments. And that's all. Thank you.
So awesome stuff. Even more kudos for doing a demo. You probably see most people go, "Oh, demo." It is always a risky thing, and you've pulled it off really well. So great work there. Thank goodness to the demo gods.
Actually, I was afraid that my lab environment doesn't break because a couple of days ago, I sat down to test my demo and woo, it was completely broken down.
Well, really happy that it all worked out, and yeah, amazing stuff. I'm just trying to look if there are any questions, and I don't see any questions. Just for me, is this kind of attack something you see often, or is something that you could probably exploit, that you come across often?
Yeah, so basically when I get onto a domain environment, the first thing I do is look for service accounts and then use Kerberos roasting to request service tickets. So yeah, it's easy to perform. It has potential, and it is dangerous because a majority of the time I've seen service accounts with higher privileges than the regular domain user account. So yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I think many people often forget about service accounts or just don't pay as much attention to those accounts than typical user accounts. So I think those probably good juicy targets. I gotta admit, I don't know much about this stuff at all. So I found this really interesting.
Well, similar situation to Sean, and similar situation actually to the last speaker, Vivian, when I was talking about IPv6 being quite scary, intimidating to kind of start to look at or get into. When it comes to any hack the box server that mentions Kerberos or Kerberos, I just, you do that thing where you're like, I'll get to it later. And you never do, and you've made it super accessible. That makes a lot of sense, and I can understand that. Basically, there's no main questions in the chat other than people going absolutely bananas over the fact that the live demos worked without a hitch. That, honestly, massive kudos and respect for doing that. It completely worked perfect every time. They were sacrificing cyber goats left, right, and center for you. It was great. No, massive respect. And you know what? Every single speaker's done this, but you've definitely done this with Kerberos. You've made me want to actually go and try and figure out how it all works and look, try some of the hack the box machines with what you've basically just explained there. It made it super accessible. So thank you so much.
There is a question from Twitch from Jenny's side. Since Kerberoasting is a technique, not a vulnerability, is there a standard defense other than block Mimikatz signatures?
Mimikatz basically allows you to extract those service tickets, right? So blocking Mimikatz is entirely different from preventing Kerberoasting. Mimikatz can be used to get clear text credentials from the LSS process. So if you block Mimikatz, you can prevent Kerberoasting, but there's not a definite solution for Kerberoasting because, as I said, this is a design feature, right? So all you can do is you can make your passwords more complex, ensure that your users change your passwords regularly, use a different password each time, and not reuse their passwords, forgotten passwords, and whatsoever.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, fantastic talk. So I think that's us. I don't see any other questions. Scott, do you have any other questions?
No, I would just be repeating again and again how awesome that was. Everything just worked and it was super accessible. I can't tell you enough how much I just delayed looking at any of that, and you've made me really want to go into it. So thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Shahrukh. And yeah, again, awesome talk.